My name is Baxter Reynolds, and at 32 years old, I never expected to feel like an outsider in my own family. The annual reunion has been our tradition for 15 years straight. So when Mom called claiming it was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances, I believed her. That is, until I decided to surprise them anyway, standing there in the backyard, watching through the fence as my entire family celebrated without me. Something broke inside me, but what they never expected was the surprise I had planned in return. If you've ever felt excluded by people who were supposed to love you, drop a like and subscribe. Where are you watching from today? Let me know as I share how I made my family go completely silent. I grew up in Portland, in what I always thought was a close-knit family. My parents, Richard and Linda Reynolds, raised 3 children in a modest suburban home with a big backyard, perfect for barbecues and gatherings. Mom always ran a tight ship, planning every family event down to the minute details and controlling most aspects of our lives. Dad was more passive, generally following whatever Mom decided was best for the family. My older sister Madison was always the golden child. She excelled at everything she touched, from academics to sports, and Mom never missed an opportunity to remind me how I should be more like her. Then there was my younger brother Jacob, the baby of the family who got away with everything. Being the middle child, I often felt caught between trying to live up to Madison's impossibly high standards and dealing with Jacob's special treatment. Our annual family reunion started when I was 17. Mom insisted it would keep us connected as we grew older and moved away. Every summer, without fail, extended family from both sides would gather at my parents' home for a weekend of food, games, catching up, and Mom's infamous slideshow presentations, highlighting family achievements. Even back then, I sometimes felt sidelined at these events. When I won 2nd place in a state programming competition, it barely warranted a mention. But when Madison got honorable mention in her debate tournament, Mom created a special segment in the slideshow just for her. These small instances built up over time, but I always brushed them off, telling myself I was being too sensitive. After college, I moved to Seattle for a job at a software company. Over the past decade, I built a successful career and recently completed a major project that earned me a promotion to senior developer. When I called Mom to share the news, her response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, honey. Still just playing with computers, huh? Did you hear Madison might be getting engaged soon?" Now that's exciting news. The contrast between my actual achievements and how my family perceived them had always been stark. My colleagues respected me. My boss valued my contributions. But to my family, I was still just the middle child who never quite measured up. My dating life suffered too. I struggled to maintain relationships because I always had this nagging feeling that I wasn't quite good enough. My last girlfriend, Alicia, pointed out that I apologized too much and seemed to expect disappointment. "It's like you're waiting for me to find someone better," she said during our breakup 6 months ago. I never connected those issues to my family dynamics until recently. Growing up, I remember birthdays where my requests were overlooked in favor of what was more convenient for everyone else. School events where my parents arrived late and left early, while they rearranged their entire schedules for Madison's activities. Family photos, where I was positioned half-hidden behind others. Each incident seemed minor in isolation, but together they formed a pattern I was only beginning to recognize. Despite the distance and subtle slights, I still made efforts to stay connected. I called weekly, remembered every birthday, and drove the 3 hours from Seattle to Portland for important events. The family reunion remained sacred on my calendar each year. 3 weeks ago, Mom called about the upcoming reunion. She sounded enthusiastic, listing the relatives who had confirmed attendance and discussing the menu in detail. I marked the date on my calendar and requested Friday off work to help with preparations, as I did every year. The weekend before the reunion, I spent hours shopping for thoughtful gifts for everyone. For Dad, a rare vinyl record by his favorite jazz musician. For Mom, an engraved bracelet with all our birthstones. For Madison, a first edition of her favorite childhood book. For Jacob, premium tickets to see his favorite basketball team. For my grandmother, a custom photo album I had digitally restored with images from her youth. I even found perfect gifts for aunts, uncles, and cousins. Then 2 days before the reunion, Mom called again. "Baxter, honey, I have some bad news. We have to cancel the reunion this year," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when delivering disappointment. "What happened?" I asked, already rearranging my schedule mentally. "Just some circumstances. You know how it is. Grandma is not feeling up to traveling. Your Uncle Steve can't make it. And we thought it would be better to try again next year when everyone can come." I was disappointed, but understood. "That makes sense, Mom. Do you want me to come down anyway? I could help you notify everyone." No, she said quickly. "Your father and I are actually thinking of taking a small trip ourselves, since we have the weekend free now. You enjoy your time in Seattle. I will call you next week." I accepted her explanation without question. Family plans change sometimes, and there was always next year. I placed all the gifts in my guest room closet, disappointed but not suspicious. Then, the day of the supposedly canceled reunion arrived, and on impulse, I decided to surprise my parents anyway. Maybe I could convince them to postpone their trip and spend some time together, just the immediate family. I packed the gifts in my car and made the 3-hour drive from Seattle to Portland, arriving at their house around 4 in the afternoon. What I saw as I approached their suburban home sent the first warning signals. The driveway was full of cars, not just my parents' vehicles, but at least 8 others, some of which I recognized as belonging to my extended family members. The very same people who supposedly couldn't attend the reunion. I felt the first stirrings of unease as I parked a little way down the street. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Perhaps Mom had managed to salvage a smaller gathering after our call and forgot to update me. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation as I approached the house with my arms full of gifts. As I walked up to my parents' home, the sound of laughter and music drifted from the backyard. The front door was locked, which was unusual during family gatherings. Instead of ringing the doorbell, something made me hesitate. The unease in my stomach grew stronger as I set down the gifts on the porch and walked around the side of the house. Our old wooden fence had a loose board that Jacob and I had used as kids to sneak in and out. I found myself automatically heading toward it, moving quietly across the lawn. The board was still loose after all these years, and I carefully pushed it aside, creating a small gap just big enough to see through. What I saw froze me in place. The backyard was transformed with streamers, balloons, and the large annual Reynolds family reunion banner my mother had custom made 5 years ago. Tables were set up with the familiar red checkered tablecloths, loaded with food and drinks. But it was the people that made my heart sink like a stone. Everyone was there. Not just my immediate family, but every single person who supposedly couldn't make it. My grandmother, who wasn't feeling up to traveling, was sitting in a lawn chair, laughing with my aunt. Uncle Steve, who couldn't make it, was manning the grill alongside my father. Cousins from Chicago who told me they were too busy with work commitments were playing volleyball on the lawn. Mom was in her element, moving between groups with a tray of her signature lemonade, beaming with satisfaction at another perfectly orchestrated event. Her blue summer dress was the same one she wore to every reunion, her lucky hosting outfit as she called it. I watched in disbelief as my father raised his glass. "A toast to family togetherness," he announced, and everyone cheered. My sister Madison stood up next, practically glowing, as she held up her left hand. Since everyone who matters is here, she emphasized, Mark and I wanted to share our news with the whole family at once. A chorus of excited congratulations erupted as everyone admired her engagement ring. The very engagement Mom had hinted about, now being announced at an event I was told didn't exist. I spotted my cousin Trevor, who had specifically texted me last week, saying he was out of state for a job interview. He was helping set up the projector for what was undoubtedly going to be Mom's traditional family slideshow. My grandmother, who supposedly couldn't travel, was now dancing to the music with my youngest cousin. My hands began to shake as I continued watching. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, and I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this a surprise party for me? But then, why tell me it was canceled? And why wasn't anyone looking toward the house, expecting my arrival? I stayed hidden, listening to snippets of conversation floating across the yard. Tomorrow's boat trip should be perfect weather, my aunt said to my uncle. I know. And then Sunday's brunch at that new place downtown, he replied. This wasn't an impromptu gathering. This was the fully planned reunion weekend, exactly as it happened every year, complete with activities for the following days. I remained frozen in place, unable to look away from the scene before me, when I heard my name mentioned. My cousin Lisa was talking to my brother Jacob. Is Baxter coming at all this weekend? She asked. Jacob shrugged. Mom said she took care of it. I think he's busy with work or something. Before Jacob could say more, Madison interrupted from nearby. Please, we finally have a peaceful reunion without Baxter's issues for once. Let's not ruin it by talking about him. My mother, overhearing as she passed by, nodded in agreement. It's so much easier this way, isn't it? No walking on eggshells, no accommodating his sensitivities, just family enjoying each other's company. The words hit me like physical blows. Each one hammered home a truth I had been avoiding for years. This wasn't a misunderstanding. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been deliberately excluded. My first impulse was to push through the fence, march into the yard, and confront them all. To demand an explanation for why they would go to such lengths to keep me away. To ask what issues and sensitivities supposedly ruined their good time. The anger that surged through me was white-hot and immediate, but something stopped me. Perhaps it was self-preservation, or maybe just the shock still reverberating through my system. Instead of charging in, I quietly replaced the fence board and backed away. No one had noticed me. I returned to my car in a daze, hands still shaking as I started the engine. I sat there for several minutes, staring blankly at my parents' house, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my cousin Rachel, not to me, but to our family group chat that suddenly had become silent for me this past week. Congratulations, Madison and Mark. So happy I could be here for the announcement. I scrolled up through the chat and realized there had been dozens of messages about the reunion that I never received. Someone had removed me from the conversation. I checked my social media accounts and found posts already appearing. Annual Reynolds family reunion, better than ever, my aunt had written, with a photo showing nearly 20 smiling family members, arms around each other, raising glasses in a toast. Tagged was every family member except me, the family I had driven 3 hours to surprise, carrying carefully chosen gifts and genuine affection, had conspired to exclude me from an event that had been part of my life for 15 years. And from their comments, it sounded like they were happier without me there. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour before finding a hotel on the outskirts of Portland. I couldn't bear the thought of returning to Seattle in my current state, but I also couldn't stay anywhere near my family's neighborhood. I chose a small place where no relatives would accidentally spot me, paid for the room, and carried in only what I needed for the night, leaving the gifts untouched in my car. In the quiet of the hotel room, I unpacked the bag containing the gift I had brought for my mother. The engraved bracelet caught the light, each birthstone representing a child she had apparently ranked in order of preference. I placed it on the desk and stared at it, memories washing over me in painful waves. I remembered my 10th birthday when my parents showed up an hour late to my small party because Madison had an unexpected dance recital practice. I remembered high school graduation when my father spent the entire ceremony recording Madison's valedictorian speech, missing the moment my name was called. I remembered last Christmas when my mother commented that Jacob's girlfriend would make such a perfect addition to the family, while she had never said a kind word about anyone I had dated. What hit me hardest was realizing these weren't isolated incidents. They formed a pattern so consistent that my family had collectively decided they enjoyed themselves more when I wasn't present, enough to orchestrate an elaborate lie to keep me away. Around midnight, I called Devin, my best friend since college. "They did what?" he exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's messed up, Bax." "Seriously? Messed up? I keep thinking maybe I misunderstood something," I said, still struggling to accept the reality. "What's there to misunderstand? Your mom straight up lied to you. The reunion wasn't canceled. You were canceled." His bluntness hurt, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. Devin knew me well enough to skip the gentle approach. "I can drive down tomorrow," he offered. "Take the day off and be there by afternoon." Initially, I declined, but Devin insisted. "You shouldn't be alone with this, man. And you definitely shouldn't confront them without backup." I cycled through emotions like a slot machine, never settling on one for more than a few minutes. Shock gave way to denial, then to a deep, aching hurt that transformed into simmering anger, only to circle back to disbelief that my family could be so deliberately cruel. I sent a message to my therapist, Dr. Campbell, requesting an emergency phone session. Even though it was late, she responded that she could talk briefly and scheduled a full session for the morning. "This is a profound betrayal, Baxter," she said during our late-night call. "What you're feeling is entirely normal given the circumstances." Sleep eluded me completely. I lay awake replaying not just the day's events but years of family interactions in a new, harsh light. Small comments, forgotten invitations, inside jokes I wasn't part of, all now revealed as pieces of a larger pattern I had refused to see. When morning finally came, I felt oddly calm, though entirely unrested. The shock had worn off, leaving a clarity that was almost startling. This treatment wasn't new, I realized. It had always been there. But I had made excuses, normalized it, and blamed myself. I began searching through old text messages and emails, finding evidence I had overlooked. 3 years ago, my cousin had mentioned a great time at the beach house that I knew nothing about. Last year, there were references to a Christmas Eve dinner I hadn't been invited to. Small gatherings had been happening for years without my knowledge. Then I found it. The smoking gun. In a group text from last month about the reunion planning. My aunt had accidentally replied to a thread I was still part of. "Should we move this to the family? -B chat?" Baxter can see all this. They had an entire separate chat group specifically to exclude me from family communications. The -B hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just being excluded from events. I was being systematically erased from the family narrative. My initial thoughts were darkly vengeful. I considered crashing their boat trip with an embarrassing scene. I thought about posting the truth on social media for all their friends to see. I drafted scathing messages that laid bare every hypocritical, hurtful action they had taken, but I didn't send them. Something held me back from matching their pettiness with my own. Perhaps it was the years of therapy helping me recognize that reacting from raw hurt would only reinforce whatever narrative they had created about my issues and sensitivities. I called my colleague Ryan, who had once mentioned being estranged from his family. "The thing is," he told me, after hearing my story, "you have to decide what you want the outcome to be. Revenge feels good for about 5 minutes. Then you're left with the same pain. But now you also feel bad about how you handled it." His words resonated with me. What did I want? Not revenge, I realized. What I wanted was acknowledgement. recognition of the pattern, perhaps even accountability. Though that seemed like too much to hope for, I began developing a plan that would address the situation maturely but memorably. I wouldn't yell or create a scene. I wouldn't match their deception with more deception. Instead, I would simply show up with evidence in hand and speak my truth calmly. The very calmness, I suspected, would be more unsettling than any outburst. I visited a local electronics store and purchased what I needed for documentation. Then, I rented additional equipment to ensure everything would work perfectly. If my family wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I would make it impossible for them to maintain that fiction. The morning of my planned confrontation, I woke early after finally getting a few hours of restless sleep. I carefully selected my outfit, choosing the suit I had worn when receiving my recent promotion. It projected success and confidence, two things my family had consistently failed to recognize in me. Standing before the hotel mirror, I rehearsed what I would say. I know the reunion wasn't canceled. I know you're all here together. What I don't know is why you felt the need to lie to me. Simple, direct, impossible to misconstrue or deny. Devin called to say he was on the road and would arrive by early afternoon. I'm about 3 hours out, he said. Do you want me to come straight to the hotel or meet you somewhere else? The hotel first, I decided. We'll go over the plan before heading to my parents' place. I also had a phone session with Dr. Campbell, who helped me set boundaries for the interaction. Remember that you cannot control their reactions, she advised. Some family members might become defensive. Others might deny everything despite evidence. Your goal is to express your truth, not to force them to accept it. What if they just make more excuses? I asked. Then, you'll have clarity about where you stand, she replied. Sometimes, the gift in these painful situations is the freedom to stop hoping for what will never come. I spent the morning researching family psychology, trying to understand the dynamics that had led to my exclusion. Middle child syndrome explained some aspects, but not the collective decision to actively deceive me. Scapegoating came closer. The family practice of channeling all negative emotions onto one member to preserve a sense of harmony among the rest. The research led me to reflect on incidents from childhood that suddenly made more sense. When I was 9, a valuable vase was broken, while all 3 of us children were playing nearby. Despite Jacob admitting he did it, somehow the family narrative became that I had created the situation that led to the accident. When I was 14, Madison's college fund was discussed openly at dinner, while mine was never mentioned. When I asked about it, the subject was changed, and later my mother told me privately not to be difficult about money matters. By midday, I left the hotel and drove around my old neighborhood, gathering my thoughts. I stopped at my elementary school, sitting in the parking lot and remembering how my mother always arrived late to pick me up, but was consistently early for Madison. I drove past the public library where I had spent countless hours, often because home didn't feel welcoming. Around noon, I stopped at Marino's, a family restaurant where we had celebrated special occasions throughout my childhood. The familiar comfort food helped strengthen my resolve. As I was paying the bill, I ran into Mrs. Patterson, our next-door neighbor from when I was growing up. "Baxter! What a wonderful surprise," she exclaimed. "Are you in town for your family's big party? Your mother has been talking about it for weeks." "Weeks?" I repeated. My suspicions confirmed that this had been long planned, not a last-minute decision after supposedly canceling. "Oh yes, Linda's been planning since before Memorial Day. She had me picking up special order decorations for her when she threw her back out last month. Said it had to be perfect since your sister might have big news to share." Mrs. Patterson continued chatting, unaware of how each word twisted the knife. The reunion had been in active planning for at least 6 weeks. The lie about cancellation had been completely premeditated. By mid-afternoon, Devin arrived at the hotel. His familiar presence was immediately calming. "You look like hell," he said bluntly, giving me a quick hug. Thanks. That's exactly the confidence boost I needed. You don't need a confidence boost, Devin replied. You need a reality check. Your family treated you like garbage, and you're still worried about approaching this the right way. That says everything about you and nothing about them. We went over the plan once more. The family would be gathering for dinner around 6, according to the schedule I had overheard. We would arrive around 6:30, giving them time to settle in but ensuring everyone would still be present. I checked social media one last time before we left. Madison had posted a series of photos with the caption, "Perfect family gathering with everyone who matters." Everyone was tagged. Except me. Of course, I packed up the equipment I had purchased and the gifts I had originally brought. I did some breathing exercises Dr. Campbell had taught me for anxiety management. Then Devin and I got into our separate cars and drove to my parents' house, arriving just as the summer sun was starting to lower in the sky. From outside, I could hear the familiar sounds of my family's dinner gathering. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, music from the playlist my father had used for family events since I was a child. I texted Devin, who had parked a little way down the street, letting him know I was ready. "I'm right behind you," he responded. "Remember, whatever happens in there doesn't define you. Their actions define them, not you." With those words bolstering my courage, I took a deep breath and approached the front door. I rang the doorbell and waited, heart hammering in my chest but expression deliberately calm. The sounds of conversation from inside dimmed slightly, and I heard my mother's voice call out, "I will get it." The door swung open, and my mother's practiced hostess smile froze on her face as she registered who was standing on her doorstep. For several seconds, she didn't speak, her eyes wide with shock and something else. Something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. "Baxter," she finally managed. "What are you doing here?" "I told you the reunion was canceled, did you?" I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "That's strange, because it looks very much in progress to me." I stepped forward slightly. Not enough to enter, but enough to see past her into the house. The dining room was visible from the entryway, the large table set with the special occasion china. Family members seated around it just beginning to notice the interruption at the door. "There must have been a misunderstanding," my mother said quickly, her hand tightening on the door as if considering closing it. "We decided last minute to have a small gathering after all. But I knew you were busy with work." "Hello, everyone." I called past her, my voice carrying into the dining room. "Sorry, I am late." The conversation stopped abruptly. Heads turned. My father half rose from his seat at the head of the table, confusion evident on his face. Madison's expression morphed from surprise to obvious annoyance. Jacob simply looked confused. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. I walked in with deliberate confidence, carrying the bags of gifts, as if this was a completely normal entrance. My mother had no choice but to step aside, though she immediately began damage control. "Baxter had a mix-up about the dates," she announced to the room. "Such a nice surprise that he could make it after all." I set the bags down by the entryway table and surveyed the room. The silence was thick enough to cut. My grandmother was the first to speak. "Linda, you said Baxter couldn't come because he had to work," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "That you had already talked to him about it. We thought you weren't invited," my cousin Trevor added bluntly, then winced as his mother elbowed him. "That's the interesting thing," I said, still maintaining a calm demeanor. "Mom told me the reunion was canceled entirely, not that I couldn't make it, but that it wasn't happening at all. She specifically mentioned that Grandma wasn't up for traveling and Uncle Steve couldn't make it." I glanced pointedly at both of them, very much present at the table. My mother's face flushed red. "Baxter, I think you misunderstood our conversation. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No, I don't think I misunderstood," I replied, reaching into my pocket for my phone. In fact, I have our text exchange right here. Would you like me to read it aloud? Or would you prefer to explain to everyone why you told me one thing while planning another? The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. My father finally stood completely. Son, there's been some confusion. Your mother handles the invitations. And sometimes, wires get crossed. The wires didn't get crossed, Dad. I interrupted gently. I was deliberately excluded. And from what I overheard yesterday when I stopped by, this isn't the first time. That revelation caused a stir. My sister Madison spoke up, her voice sharp. You were spying on us? That's exactly the kind of drama we were trying to avoid. The doorbell rang again, providing a momentary distraction. My mother moved to answer it, perhaps grateful for the interruption, only to find Devin standing there. Hi, Mrs. Reynolds, he said pleasantly. Baxter mentioned there was a family gathering today. Hope you don't mind one more. She had no choice but to let him in, though her smile had become brittle. Devin came to stand beside me, a silent show of support that immediately strengthened my resolve. I began methodically removing the gifts from the bags I had brought, placing each one on the entry table as I spoke. I spent last weekend shopping for all of you, I said, addressing the room. When Mom called to say the reunion was canceled, I was disappointed, but understood. Family circumstances happen. What I didn't understand was why she felt the need to lie when the truth would have been simpler. You didn't want me here. That's not true, my father protested weakly. Isn't it? I countered. Madison, yesterday I heard you say, and I quote, we finally have a peaceful reunion, without Baxter's issues for once. Mom, you agreed that it was so much easier this way, without having to walk on eggshells around me. Madison had the grace to look embarrassed, though she quickly rallied. You took that out of context. What possible context would make that okay? Devin asked quietly. I continued placing gifts on the table. For Madison and Mark, a first edition of Little Women. The book you said changed your life when you were 12. I placed it in front of my sister, whose engagement ring glittered as her hand involuntarily reached toward the carefully wrapped package. Congratulations on your engagement, by the way. I had to find out about it by watching through the fence yesterday, since no one bothered to tell me directly. Mark, Madison's fiancé, looked uncomfortably between my sister and me. You said your whole family would be here for the announcement, he said to her quietly. I moved on, placing each gift on the table and describing it briefly. For Dad, the 1,959 Miles Davis vinyl you've been searching for since college. For Grandma, a restored photo album with pictures from your childhood I had professionally digitized and repaired. With each gift, the silence in the room deepened. These weren't generic presents, but thoughtful items that demonstrated intimate knowledge of each family member's desires and history. The contrast between my consideration and their deception became increasingly stark. When I reached my mother's gift, I paused. For Mom, a custom bracelet with all your children's birthstones. All three of us. Even the one you decided wasn't worth including today. She reached for it automatically, then stopped herself, her hand trembling slightly. Baxter, you're making this into something it's not, she said. But her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Then perhaps you can explain this. I pulled out my phone again and displayed the text thread I had discovered. This is Aunt Carol accidentally replying to the wrong group chat last month. Should we move this to the family-B chat? Baxter can see all this. Aunt Carol looked mortified, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You have an entire separate chat group specifically to exclude me from family communications, I continued. So, please don't tell me I'm making this into something it's not. I have years of evidence suggesting this is exactly what it appears to be. The surprise I had planned was simple but effective. I connected my phone to a small portable projector I had purchased and directed it toward the empty wall near the dining table. On screen appeared a folder labeled Family Patterns, containing dozens of screenshots, text messages, emails, and social media posts I had compiled overnight, all documenting a clear pattern of exclusion going back years. This isn't about one canceled reunion, I explained calmly. This is about a lifetime of being treated as an afterthought, an inconvenience, or worse, an active problem to be managed and minimized. The documented evidence was impossible to dismiss as misunderstanding or oversensitivity. There were photos of family gatherings I had never known about, conversations planning events with explicit mentions of not telling me, and the most damning, multiple references to the family minus B group in various contexts. As the images scrolled by, the atmosphere in the room shifted from defensive tension to uncomfortable recognition. No one spoke. No one could deny what was plainly displayed before them. I think we should discuss this privately, my mother said, standing abruptly. The rest of you, please continue with dinner. Baxter, your father and I can talk with you in the study. No, I said firmly. I've been silenced and sidelined enough. Whatever needs to be said can be said here, with everyone present. After all, everyone participated in this deception. My mother looked to my father for support, but for once, he didn't immediately back her play. He remained seated, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen him. Some of my extended family members began making awkward excuses to leave. Uncle Steve mumbled something about an early start tomorrow, while Aunt Lisa suddenly remembered a babysitter with a curfew. Despite her children being teenagers, the exodus began. Family members filing past with awkward pats on my shoulder or whispered apologies. Devin stood quietly beside me, his presence a reminder that family could be chosen, not just inherited. As the dining room cleared, distinct factions formed. Madison and my mother stood together, a united front of defensiveness. My father sat alone, seemingly lost in thought. Jacob had moved to stand near me, his expression troubled and confused. Madison's fiancé Mark looked distinctly uncomfortable, witnessing for the first time the dysfunction that ran beneath our family's carefully maintained surface. I should give you all some space to talk, he suggested. No, please stay, I said. You're about to become part of this family. You should know what you're marrying into. Madison shot me a venomous look, but Mark nodded and remained, though he stepped back slightly, as if to observe rather than participate. With fewer people in the room, we moved to the living room, where the confrontation continued. My mother immediately tried to regain control of the narrative. Baxter has always been sensitive, she began, addressing the room as if I wasn't present. We've tried to accommodate his feelings, but sometimes it's exhausting to constantly manage one person's emotional needs above everyone else's. Linda, my father finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically firm. That's not fair. And you know it. The unexpected contradiction from my normally acquiescent father seemed to startle my mother into momentary silence. Devin spoke up. From an outside perspective, Mrs. Reynolds, it doesn't look like you've been accommodating Baxter's feelings at all. It looks like you've been deliberately excluding him and then blaming him for reacting to it. Before my mother could respond, cousin Trevor, who had lingered despite the exodus, spoke up. This isn't the first time, Baxter. Last Thanksgiving, when you couldn't make it because of work, Aunt Linda told everyone not to post pictures online so you wouldn't feel bad about missing it. But then, at Christmas, I overheard her telling Madison that family events were less dramatic when you weren't there. My grandmother, who had insisted on staying despite the tension, shook her head sadly. I'm very disappointed in how this family has treated you, Baxter. Your grandfather would be too. The mention of my grandfather, who had passed away 5 years ago and had always shown me unconditional affection, nearly broke my composure. I took a deep breath before responding. I'm not here to guilt anyone or demand apologies. I just want honesty. I want to understand why my own family would go to such lengths to exclude me while pretending everything was normal. The room fell silent again until Jacob, who had been unusually quiet throughout, suddenly spoke. Is that why I was told not to mention the beach house rental to Baxter last summer? Mom said it was because he was too busy with work to join us, but that we shouldn't bother him about it. All eyes turned to my mother, whose composure finally began to crack. Everything I've done has been to protect this family's harmony, she insisted, though her voice wavered. Baxter has always been different. More sensitive. More demanding of attention. That's not true. My father interrupted again, standing up to face my mother directly. Linda, we need to be honest about this. All of it. Dad, don't, Madison warned, but he shook his head. No, this has gone on too long. Baxter deserves the truth. My mother's face drained of color. Richard, this isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time and place, he countered. Our son is standing here showing us years of evidence that we've treated him as an outsider in his own family. If not now, when? The tension in the room was palpable, as my parents stared at each other in silent communication. Finally, my mother sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Madison was always easy, she began quietly. She did everything right. Everything expected. Jacob was the baby. Everyone's darling. But you, Baxter, you were always questioning, always noticing things, pointing out inconsistencies, needing explanations. Do you know how uncomfortable that made me feel? How exposed? Mom, what are you saying? I asked, genuinely confused. My father took over, his voice gentle but firm. What your mother is trying to say is that you reminded her too much of herself. The part of herself she spent her whole life trying to suppress. The part that questions, that doesn't just accept things at face value. That's not it, my mother protested weakly. It is, my father insisted. And it's also because of what happened when he was born. The room went completely still. Even Devon looked confused. What happened when I was born? I asked. My mother closed her eyes briefly, then looked directly at me for what felt like the first time in years. We were having problems in our marriage, she admitted. Serious problems. Your father and I separated briefly when Madison was 3. During that time, I had a relationship with someone else. The implications hung in the air. Unspoken, but unmistakable. Are you saying I'm not? I couldn't even finish the question. No, my father said firmly. You are my son, Baxter. A paternity test confirmed it before you were even a month old. But the doubt, the fear during that time, it created something in our family dynamic that we never properly addressed. So, I've been punished my entire life for something that wasn't even true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Not intentionally, my mother said, tears now flowing freely. But I think I never quite forgave myself for the doubt, for the fear, and that affected how I treated you. Even after we knew the truth. Madison looked shocked. I never knew any of this. Of course you didn't, my father replied. We thought we were protecting all of you by keeping it secret. Instead, we created an environment where Baxter was treated differently without ever understanding why. The revelation left me speechless. All these years of feeling like an outsider had stemmed from a secret I never knew existed. A doubt about my very place in the family that had been resolved medically, but never emotionally. I deserved better than this, I finally said, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil inside. All of us deserved better. Some family members tried to approach with immediate reconciliation attempts. My mother stood and moved toward me, arms outstretched. But I stepped back. I need time, I said firmly. This isn't something that can be fixed with a hug and an apology. There are years of patterns here that need to change. What are you saying? My mother asked. alarm evident in her voice. I'm saying that I won't be part of a family that treats me as optional. I won't keep showing up for people who don't value my presence. I'm setting boundaries. Starting now, I gathered my coat and nodded to Devon. We walked toward the door together, leaving the gifts still displayed on the table. Tangible reminders of my genuine care for people who had failed to reciprocate it. "Baxter, please," my mother called after me. I paused at the door. I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm just making a choice about how I allow myself to be treated. When you're ready to have an honest relationship, I'll be ready to talk. Devon and I walked out, leaving behind a silence so complete it followed us out the door and into the warm summer evening. Devon and I ended up at an all-night diner near my hotel, the kind of place with vinyl booths and waitresses who call you honey regardless of your age. Over coffee and pie, I began processing the emotional earthquake that had just occurred. "I still can't believe they had a separate chat group called Family-B," Devon said, shaking his head. "That's cold, man. What I can't believe is the reason behind it all," I replied, still trying to wrap my head around my parents' revelation. All these years of feeling like an outsider because of something that happened before I was even born, something that turned out not even to be true. We talked until the diner's fluorescent lights seemed to blur at the edges, examining the confrontation from every angle. Devon stayed in my hotel room that night, taking the uncomfortable pull-out sofa rather than driving back to Seattle or getting his own room. A silent act of friendship I deeply appreciated. "Family is complicated," he said as we were both drifting toward sleep. "But they don't get to decide your worth. Remember that." The next morning, my phone began pinging with text messages from various family members. Jacob was the first. A simple but heartfelt message. "I had no idea, Bax. I'm really sorry. Can we talk when you're ready?" My mother's message was predictably defensive at first. "I hope you're satisfied with disrupting a special family gathering. We need to discuss this privately." But an hour later, she sent another. "I didn't sleep last night thinking about everything. There's so much I need to say to you." My father's message surprised me most. It was the first direct communication I could remember receiving from him that didn't seem filtered through my mother's perspective. "I failed you, son. Not just yesterday, but for years. I'd like the chance to do better, on your terms." Madison's response took longest to arrive and revealed her struggle between defensiveness and recognition. "What you did was uncomfortable for everyone, especially Mark. But I understand why you felt you had to do it. I never knew about what happened when you were born. It doesn't excuse everything, but it explains some things. I still think you've always been too sensitive, but maybe I've been insensitive. I don't know. This is hard." Devon and I drove back to Seattle together the next day, a road trip that became unexpectedly therapeutic. With each mile that separated me from Portland, I felt myself breathing a little easier, thinking a little clearer. "What are you going to do now?" Devon asked as we crossed the state line. "Set boundaries," I replied. "Real ones this time. No more accepting scraps of attention or making excuses for being treated like an afterthought." Back in Seattle, I focused on work, finding comfort in the structure and the environment where my contributions were valued. My team had completed the project in my absence, and my boss made a point of highlighting my crucial early work during our success celebration. "Couldn't have done it without Baxter's foundation," he announced to the team. "Some of the cleanest code architecture I've seen in 20 years. That simple professional acknowledgement felt more validating than years of strained family interactions. Dr. Campbell helped me navigate the aftermath of the confrontation, particularly the complex emotions stirred up by my parents' revelation. "The story they told themselves about you began before you could speak for yourself," she pointed out. "That doesn't make their behavior acceptable, but it helps explain the depth and persistence of the pattern." I deliberately skipped the monthly family video call the following week, the first family obligation I had ever willingly missed. Instead of feeling guilty, I felt relieved, a sensation that confirmed I was moving in the right direction. My chosen family expanded to fill the space left by establishing boundaries with my biological one. Devin and I began a Sunday hiking tradition. I joined a programming meetup group where I met Alicia, a database architect with a sharp wit who didn't look surprised or disappointed when I shared vulnerabilities. 3 months after the confrontation, I agreed to meet Jacob one-on-one when he came to Seattle for a work conference. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, both of us visibly nervous. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said after we got past the initial awkwardness. "Looking back at how things were, how mom and dad treated you differently, I just accepted it as normal, because it was all I knew." "You were the youngest," I reminded him. "It wasn't your job to fix the family dynamic. Maybe not then. But I'm an adult now. I can make my own choices about how I want our relationship to be." We began rebuilding our connection, this time as equals rather than as roles in a dysfunctional system. Jacob started texting me directly about his life, rather than relying on family-wide communications, a small but significant change. 6 months after the confrontation, I agreed to a carefully negotiated dinner with my parents when they came to Seattle. We met at a restaurant, avoiding the power dynamic that would have come with using any of our homes. My mother had started therapy, a fact she shared with a mixture of reluctance and pride. "I never thought I needed it," she admitted. "But after everything that happened, your father insisted. He said he was going whether I joined him or not." My father seemed different too, more present, more willing to express his own thoughts rather than deferring to my mother. "I let things go on too long," he said simply. "I convinced myself I was keeping the peace. But really, I was just avoiding conflict at your expense." The dinner wasn't a magical healing moment, but it was a step toward a more honest relationship. I maintained my boundaries firmly, but without animosity. When my mother began slipping into her old patterns, talking over me or dismissing my perspectives, I calmly pointed it out. To my surprise, she caught herself and apologized. 8 months after the confrontation came the real test: Madison's engagement party. After much consideration, I decided to attend, bringing Alicia, who by then had become an important part of my life. "Remember, we can leave any time," she assured me as we approached my parents' house. "Just give me the signal." The difference in family dynamics was immediately noticeable. My mother greeted me with a restrained warmth that felt more authentic than her previous effusive performances. Madison made a point of introducing Alicia to everyone, a courtesy she had never extended to any of my previous partners. Most telling was how family members interacted with me directly rather than through the buffer of others. Conversations felt more genuine, connections more real. There were still moments of tension, old patterns threatening to reassert themselves. But they were recognized and often corrected, either by me or sometimes surprisingly by others. "Mom, let Baxter finish," Jacob said. At one point when our mother interrupted my story about a recent work project, the table went momentarily silent, everyone recognizing the significance of the intervention, before conversation resumed on more equal footing. 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, I hosted Thanksgiving at my Seattle apartment, inviting Devin, Alicia, and a few other close friends alongside Jacob and his new girlfriend. My parents and Madison's family had their own celebration in Portland. The separation wasn't punitive but practical, a recognition that we were still rebuilding, and that some distance allowed for healthier interactions. The holiday felt different than any I had experienced before, free from the tension and hypervigilance that had always accompanied family gatherings. We played games, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's company without the weight of unacknowledged patterns pressing down on us. Jacob pulled me aside before leaving. "I wanted you to know that things are different at home too," he said. "We talk about stuff now. Real stuff. Dad stands up to Mom when she gets controlling. It's not perfect, but it's better. And it's because of what you did." As I reflect on the journey from that devastating discovery to where I am now, I realized the most important lesson wasn't about family loyalty or confrontation techniques. It was about self-worth, about refusing to accept treatment that diminishes you, even when it comes from people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. The family chat group now includes everyone, and there are no secret minus anyone alternatives. My relationship with my parents continues to evolve, sometimes taking steps forward, occasionally steps back, but always with more honesty than before. Madison and I may never be close, but we've reached a mutual respect that seemed impossible a year ago. What I know now is that family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by behavior, by the consistent choice to value each other's presence, to make space for each other's voices, to acknowledge each other's worth. The real healing came not from changing my family, but from changing myself, from recognizing that I deserve respect and have the power to demand it. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is simply refusing to participate in your own diminishment. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, know that you're not alone. Your feelings are valid, and you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Have you ever had to confront your family about how they treat you? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes finding your voice is the first step to healing, and setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself.